Welcome back to Care Beyond the Chart, Strength Behind the Scrubs, the podcast where we explore the moments, people, and stories that remind us nursing is about so much more than tasks, charts, and medications. Today's episode is about one of those people, a nurse named Martha Vergara. We're remembering her as a nurse and the imprint she made, not because she was the loudest voice in the room or because she held the highest title, but because of how she showed up for people. She instilled confidence, she offered dignity before judgment, she led with humor, faith, gentleness, and humanity. I would have loved to interview Martha herself, but unfortunately that just wasn't possible. Martha passed away 3 years ago. While she's no longer with us, she exemplified not just the science, but also the art of nursing. To help tell her story and explain the example that she was, I'm joined by two people who knew her well and experienced firsthand the impact she had. I have here with me today Pat Gerig and Erin Cunningham. Welcome, friends. Let's start off by letting you guys tell my listeners a little bit more about who you are and how you knew Martha exactly.
My name is Patricia Gerig, and I just retired a year ago after 48 years of nursing.
Congratulations.
Yes, I'm having a good time. I started working with Martha in 2005 and at Long-Term Acute Care Hospital. And she was a wonderful person. I can't say enough good things about her, but anyway, I guess the question was about me. Sorry. Anyway, so I was an LPN for a really long time, 27 years. And then my husband passed away and I decided to go back to school full time and became an RN, and my job at that LTAC hospital was my first job as an LPN, or as an RN, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to retire from there. I had every intention. And they gave me great opportunities, and I ended up being a wound nurse. And then when we closed, I went on to another hospital here in Fort Wayne and was a certified wound and ostomy nurse there. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I loved wounds. And I loved nursing.
Absolutely.
And I'm Erin Cunningham. I moved to Fort Wayne 20 years ago when I got married. And I did start out in a nursing home here in town in Fort Wayne. And it just wasn't meeting my nursing needs. Mm-hmm. And so I did another job search. And it was actually one of my first hospital bedside jobs, and absolutely loved it. So challenging. Martha was probably one of the first people to befriend me when I moved here to town. So I actually started working every other weekend so that I could work with her, which was pretty amazing to work with the weekend staff. But she was just so encouraging of anybody that wanted to advance professionally, whether it was education or work growth. Mm-hmm. And so through that encouragement, I did apply for a position outside of the hospital setting, but still within the corporation. So I'm still with them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, she was just so proud and just so encouraging. And I've been a nurse since 1994. So still love it and encouraging people today because of Martha's encouragement.
Absolutely. That's also how I knew Martha was working with her at the Long-Term Acute Care Hospital, and how I also know the two of you. Before we jump into stories, I want listeners to meet her through your eyes. When you think of her, what's the first word or image that comes to mind?
Dignity.
Professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
She was, as you said, the quiet voice in the room, but she was so strong, and she had a capacity for calmness. And if a situation was getting, difficult for one of the nurses, Martha would just step in, and she also knew when it was a time for teaching, as opposed to a time for stepping in and lending hands.
Yeah. She was kind of, as you were saying that, I was thinking in my head, she was kind of like a salve. If it was like chaos or whatever was going on, she could instantly bring calm. We could get whatever we needed done. We could move forward. And yeah, compassion too. So what comes to mind for me thinking about her? Can you remember, and Erin, you mentioned this a little bit, but can you remember your first impression of her when you met her?
She was just really friendly, and she had a quiet leadership. She didn't have to be loud about it, but she was also very collaborative. Like Pat was saying, she could assess quickly when somebody needed taught versus somebody was in need of assistance, true assistance. And even if they needed the assistance, she did go back later and still gave some teaching. So she was always the teacher.
Yeah, I think that's how she instilled confidence, because I was a brand new baby nurse there, and sometimes I think she believed in me more than I believed in myself.
That would be true. She could do that.
Remember how she would always talk about closing the loop?
So going back and giving that teaching where maybe it wasn't appropriate at the beginning and to trying to instill that confidence, but then coming back to that. Did she immediately feel different than other nurses to you?
I can't say that she did, really. I think it took me a while to, because I was so brand new to the area, to just open up myself to everybody.
All of a sudden, we were a group of friends that socialized outside of the hospital, and we called each other when we had problems to talk about. And I can't remember the one occasion that kicked that all off.
It just happened kind of organically.
Yes. And we're still friends with her family.
Yeah.
We're still involved in her family's life. They consider us family.
Yeah, they do.
She's often been described as someone who brought joy into every room she entered. Do you think that was intentional, or was it just naturally who she was?
I think it was a combination. I think she made sure part of her nature is to bring joy, peace. But I also think that it was intentional that no matter where she was, what was personal when she came into the room and at work was definitely to uplift people. And like Pat was saying, during our friendship, if something was off, she would make sure she just quietly lent an ear, which is really a great experience. And I try to do that. I try to emanate that myself. And it's not about me. Let me listen. Or, she would come into the case management office and we had a window finally after 6 years of being just walled in. And she's like, venti, I'm going to vent. And that's what Spanish for venti is venting. And there's the windows and I'm going to let it all out into the world and let it go.
I love that. I think when you were saying that, it made me think about how it just it was natural for her, and she could just disarm you very easily in her way. I think it was natural, but yes, she definitely used it intentionally. And it made me think about, we talk a lot about incivility in nursing and nursing needing their young. She was the total opposite of that.
She was. She was always
nurtured.
Very mindful. That was, I think, maybe one of the things that I loved about her the most was that she was able to stay calm because, hey, I'm not one of those people. Anybody that knows me knows that. But Martha just always kept her cool.
That's something that I've always wanted to emanate about her, just making everybody in the room feel comfortable and needed and wanted and as if they belong. Because like I said, sometimes in nursing, we aren't always in spaces with nurses like that. And it can be very difficult.
And I will say, and that's really important because either you liked the work we did or you didn't. It was either where we worked, it was either the niche that filled or it wasn't. And a lot of long-term coworkers would wait to see what you were going to react. If you were going to embrace it, then they would embrace you. If you weren't, they weren't going to get near you. And Martha would embrace people when they were new and try to bring them onto the team. She didn't wait for them to make the decision, but she also helped people decide, was this really the place for me?
Sure. If someone listening never had the chance to meet her, what story would you tell so they would better understand who she really was?
I don't know. That's kind of I don't know if I have one. It's kind of hard.
One day, I had spent probably a good hour doing wound care with a patient. He was para that unfortunately kept having to come in for flaps and grafts. And so I spent a lot of time with him, and he was there very frequently. And during one of his stays, he decided that he didn't want to bathe.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And patient rights.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have to take one of those, those deodorant things with the little balls of, I would take it in and set it on the windowsill where it was blowing. And I'd be like, come on, buddy, this
isn't the
really
hill you want to die on.
Bathing, you really, come on, buddy. And of course, I always wore a lab jacket. And I walked out of his room and back to my office, and Martha stuck her head in to tell me something. Then she went, Patty, you stink.
It clung to you.
I said, let me take my jacket off. But I love the fact that she cared enough to let me know that I had soaked up the odor in that room.
One of the stories that I often share with my students about her, so our hospital rented the 7th and 8th floor from an existing hospital. It was a hospital within a hospital. And so sometimes if our census was really low, we would combine the 2 floors, all the patients to one floor and close the other floor. And so on this particular occasion, we had closed the 8th floor, and the 7th floor is where all of our patients were. But as a charge nurse, she still had to go up to the 8th floor and check the crash cart and things like that in case we opened it back up. And while she was up there, and this was winter time, call light went off in a room. And also it was a very old hospital, and it was not uncommon for call lights to randomly go off and there not be anybody in that room. And, the nurses all said it was ghosts or whatever. And so she went to investigate, and what she found is that a homeless gentleman had found his way into the hospital and up to that room and was seeking shelter there. And anybody rightfully could have been very scared of that situation and immediately called security and said, come get this guy out, made a big deal and that of it. She did tell him, you can't be here. But before she sent him on his way, she ordered a tray of food to feed him and then gave him supplies so that he could clean himself up a little bit before she sent him on his way. And I think that just exemplified who she was.
Oh, very much so.
She, like I said, could have been very scared in that moment. And sometimes I think about, how would I have reacted? I don't know if I would have reacted like her. I would like to think that I would have reacted like she did, but I don't know.
Yeah, I know myself well enough that I don't know that I would have.
Mm-hmm. I love the fact that she didn't concern herself of what if ramifications. Would the upper leadership be upset that she gave a tray?
Right.
By God, you gave a tray. And that's the kind of point we miss in nursing.
Yes.
I mean, that's the harder thing, to still have your own identity as a nurse, to realize this is what's right, and I'm helping that person. And that's definitely Martha.
Who she was.
I'd like to think that I would have had that rebellious streak. But again, I agree with Pat. I don't know if I would have. Depends upon the environment that day.
Right. Yeah, I think I unfortunately might have diverted more to being scared of this person than seeing them as, okay, this is a person I need to help. Like I said, I like to think that I would have thought that way and how she thought, but I don't know. One thing that stands out about her is, and we've talked about this a little bit, she seemed to believe in people before they believed in themselves. And I know for me that rang true. Sometimes I think, like, you're giving me a lot of credit here, as she would send me off to do something. Can you think of a moment where she did that for you, or where you saw her do that for another nurse?
I don't know if there was really one specific moment. The weekends, you don't have all the support staff you have during the week. Mm-hmm. So we were the support staff. We really did support one another. And I recall having a patient that had to go down for a procedure, and I felt like I was the one that needed to go. And Martha was like, no, I'm going to go. And there were some other things with that patient that more and more things were developing over the weekend, and getting consults and such like that. And she really stepped up. That's where as the charge, she really stepped up. And that particular weekend, we also had a patient who, it was just such a challenge for staff. So to be fair, in a 12-hour shift, we rotated that patient like every 4 hours. So no one person was burnt out and afraid of the situation, and that we made sure that the care that could be the best given to that patient and their family during their time.
Yeah. She had this reputation, as we've talked about, for being calm and gentle, even during difficult conversations. What did that actually look like? Do you see her, exemplify that?
That again is where she quietly listens. And she lets whether it was the patient or the family or even the physician, be verbally upset. She never took it on personally that you would see. Like, she might have dealt with it later, but you weren't seeing her get outwardly frustrated.
Defensive
Right. But just her calm, quiet demeanor of, okay, and now what do you want to do?
Oh my gosh, that sounded so much like her when you saying that. Yes. You're right. She would just listen and like, okay, so now what? Did she ever teach you something that had nothing to do with nursing skills, but changed the way you approach life?
I think definitely the way she is open to friendships, relationships. And, not every friendship has to be deep, but she made everybody feel like a friend. And I think that has really played a part for me throughout my years in both personal and professional, for sure.
Yeah. When you were just talking a moment ago about not taking it personally when a family or a patient or physician or whatever was upset, that's something that is definitely a takeaway from my experience with her. And something that I still talk to students about is that it's that cycle of grief that patients and families go through. And the easy target becomes you as the nurse, but it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what they're going through. I think that that's something that I learned from her example, is being able to separate myself from, yes, they're giving it to me right now. They're unhappy and they're quote unquote unhappy with me, but they're not really. It's about what's going on.
But I'm the messenger.
Right.
And as a case manager, that's where it's hard. And you really have to pull up a shield to defend yourself, because you can't just, and yes, with the long-term acute care hospital, it's an acute care hospital, but they do have a longer time. It's not the quick turnaround as the LTACs, right?
Right.
So you're dealing with that patient a little more frequently, but some of those discharge locations and places are not what they envisioned when they went into the hospital for the first day.
Right.
So by the time they've been with us, they are going through that grieving process. And even though they heard the information before our facility, they're just now sinking in. So
the reality
going through that whole grief process, that my life is truly changing. And I think the beauty of it, especially with us as a team at Fort Wayne, was we all supported where they were, but also supported the fact that we know what the limitations were, because we talked to one another. We talked from nursing to therapist to physician of, hey, we don't have this in our community. And so, really being able, like Martha would share, to listen, give them time, but then maybe a couple days later, you're going to have to go back and talk to them again.
Yeah.
And be able to take that last talk and say, you've had time to think about it. So where are we now? What more questions do you have? And she was really excellent too, to be able to, when you had to have a conversation with the family, the attending, and if she was charged, she came in as the charge nurse in place of the staff nurse, so that holistically we could all come in together and have the same conversation and be able to support that patient and their family throughout the time of making their decision, so that we were good stewards with their resources. So when it was time that insurance said you had to go, everybody was on board. And that is so unique that not many healthcare systems actually see, but I think Fort Wayne's team really pulled a lot together.
How do you think she mentored people without making them feel small?
Because I don't think she'd be capable of.
It just wasn't in her.
Well, there might be
a few cases,
a few exceptions to the rule. But when it came to colleagues, nursing staff, and I don't believe she would ever want to make someone feel small. The thing that always amazed me was when physicians would be on the floor and Martha was in charge. There was a whole different feel, because those physicians had such respect for Martha.
Yeah, and trust.
And it was a whole different feel when Martha was in charge.
I would agree. And I think that with her, she wanted people to succeed. So that's where she came from, was a point of supporting someone. So she was going to mentor in a way that you were going to feel successful. And like you were saying, she was giving you, Misty, oh my God, why are you believing in me? I can barely believe in myself. And she's like, come on, let's go do this, You
can do it.
You can do it. And that was the other thing. Come on, let's us go do this. And she just had that way. And because of it, it was contagious. And we supported each other throughout the teams that way too, that, hey, I heard you're wanting to do this. Tell me about it. Like it really struck fire of excitement.
It's funny because this makes me think of another thing that I always tell my students, and it really comes from the same example that she was, is that, it's okay to have a bad day, But when every day is a bad day in nursing, then you need to rethink what you're doing, because when you come in and it's a bad day, it affects everybody else. It affects the whole team. It then affects how the day goes. But when you find the joy in what you're doing, even though what we do is very hard and difficult, it sets the tone for everybody. And that spreads just like the other. The negativity can spread, the positivity can too. And even on really hard days, if she was in charge, I knew we were okay. We're going to get through this, and it's going to be okay, because that's what she brought to us.
And, on the weekends, because I worked every other weekend, I didn't have to, but I enjoyed the team that we worked with on the weekends. So I would make sure it was the weekends that, we had some movement in our schedule. But from bedside nursing assistant through therapists, that we did have sometimes therapists on the weekend, it was just methodical. She and a team would just move from one end of the hall through the next, and we would get everybody up. It was, mobility was never in question on the weekend. It was just, this is the expectation, this is what we do, and we did it together.
Yep.
And then, when it came time to putting people back to bed, we all just did it together. And I think it really was because of that leadership, because she's going to step up and she's going to be doing things. And it made other people who wanted to emanate that and to really put the best step forward.
Servant leadership comes to mind as you're saying that.
And even our physicians, they saw that in her and then in the rest of the team. And I remember the medical director who was an attending, a patient was not doing well, and somebody asked if we needed to send them to the ICU. And I remember the pulmonologist saying no, because this team can do better and they'll have the better care
here
because they know them.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably one of the most glowing comments and compliments that any medical team can really get.
One of my favorite things about the stories like these, as we're talking about Martha, is that extraordinary nurses are often just ordinary people doing very small things consistently. And somehow those moments become unforgettable, just in how she treated people, anyhow, in just her approach, the impact, just small things that she did that had huge impact, even humor. She was incredibly funny. She had a good sense of humor even when a trick was played on her. Yes. I was working night shift, and one of the techs played a trick on me where we had been doing annual skills, and so we had a mannequin in one of the rooms that we weren't using, and I had forgot it was in there, and the tech had set the mannequin up on a chair and then came and told me that the HVAC was making a weird noise in there. And so night shift, I go up and down, and I walk into the room and I see this silhouette of this mannequin, and I think it's a person, and about crap my pants. And, they
in
all
a very old 100-year-old building.
Right. That everybody says is haunted to begin with. And so anyhow, then later in my shift, Martha was coming in on day shift, and she always got there about 5:30. She had a specific routine. She always had her white lab coat on. She would go print the census, and she would roll it up and stick it in her pocket. And then she'd come through and flip the hallway lights on, and everybody would groan because, we're all night shifters and vampires or whatever. And so anyhow, I got the idea that I was going to take the mannequin and I laid it on the floor with its legs sticking out of that room because I knew when she flipped the lights on, she would see it. And of course, it played out just like that. She flipped the lights on, looked down the hall, and she took off running, yelling in Spanish. I don't even know what she was saying. And then she got down there and realized that it was the mannequin on the floor, and she gave me the what how. But she laughed about it and appreciated the joke. So,
oh my God, that is so true. Because when she got riled, that's when you knew. That's
yes.
when you knew. She started Spanish, and you were like, oh no.
Like, I don't know what she's saying, but I'm scared.
This isn't good. We all better pull ourselves together. One of her processes would be to go through and change the batteries out of the telepacks. she had a pocket full of AA batteries as she went down, and her pocket started smoking.
And change. She
had change.
Her pocket caught on fire.
Because she had change in her pocket.
There's just like tendrils of smoke coming up out of her pocket.
And Kathleen was like, "Hey, Hot Pockets." And Martha's like, "What are you talking about?" And you hear her pocket starting to smoke. So she takes care of it, and then she demurely says, "Oh, I'll write up my incident report."
I love that. Even in that, she kept her cool. But yes, she would start speaking in Spanish when she got really riled up.
Yeah, her nickname was Hot Pockets for a while.
What do you think that she understood about people that the rest of us sometimes miss?
She never missed their humanity. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that she came to this country when she was like 9 years old, went through some kind of harrowing childhood experiences, and was just always going to do better. Mm-hmm. You know, she was an LPN before she became an RN, and then she went on to get her master's
and her nurse practitioner.
Yeah. And I remember when she had graduated and had scores of practices throughout the city wanting her to come on board with them. Mm-hmm. She called and was like, "Can I come over and talk to you?" And I can still remember her perched on the edge of my couch, and we were discussing the pros and cons of all her different offers. And I was honored, actually, to think that she valued my opinion. I was so proud just to be a sounding board for her. Mm-hmm. But she never, even after she was diagnosed, she never stopped. She kept working. She just kept going.
Something that strikes me right now, kind of the buzzwords with Joint Commission and even in how we're teaching academically students, is social determinants of health. And she was like ahead of the game in thinking about social determinants of health, because it really was in her approach to patients in addressing kind of those things, those psychosocial things that they couldn't necessarily help, but that influenced how they sought care or their care. And she was such a good example of how we all should be in approaching patients, where sometimes it's very easy to judge patients for their choices. Well, you wouldn't be here if you just took your medicine. Okay, well, true, but there might be a reason they're not taking their medicine, like choosing to feed their kids over taking their medicine. She definitely was one that would see the big picture in those terms. And that's why the story of the homeless man that I just shared, I share with my students, because that's how she was. And it's such a great example of paying attention to the needs and not just, okay, we got to follow the rules.
Yeah, as a rule follower, as myself, I would say she definitely brought a different vision of how you can be a nurse and have compassion and still follow rules. I also think that, like Pat was saying, through the growth and raising experience that Martha had through the different cultures between, Mexico and here in America, she allowed that to forge herself as a nurse and as a human to be able to approach things from that eye, where some of us haven't had those experiences, to be able to cultivate it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also think that her love of family, that she was able to have a work-life balance. She definitely spent time with her family. She spent time with her friends, but she didn't let work overshadow that. Mm-hmm. And she made sure that she could attend the family functions, events, and still make sure the work schedule met their family needs.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing of figuring out the work-life balance and making sure you have the friends who, whether they're in healthcare or not, but can support you. Mm-hmm. And I think she demonstrated that really well.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked a lot about her heart as a nurse. Now I want to hear a little bit more just about her personality, because you just mentioned her personal life and her intentions there. You already told a funny story about Hot Pockets, but a funniest memory of her? I have a couple.
I don't know that I have a funniest memory, but I have one that she and my fiance, Phil, had this connection that Phil and I would walk into her house and she'd be, "Hi, Patty." "Phil, it's so good to see you." And she's hugging on him. And, and then it would be like, "Oh, hi, Pat." She was they just adored each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did.
Oh, spending time with her was just wonderful. Mm-hmm. We'd call at the last minute and say, "Hey, we're going to Henry's. Can you join us?" And we're on the way home from Indianapolis from a soccer game, but we'll be there.
Yeah.
Save some seats. It was just, gosh, I miss that.
And definitely her retail therapy. She loved retail therapy. One of my favorite memories was I actually did a Black Friday with her and her daughter and my daughter. And that was so much fun. I mean, we just had a good time and really even bought a lot of stuff, but it was just fun being within the crowds and just checking out what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. So the story I have about her, we had gotten sent to Grand Rapids. It was me, her, and another nurse. This other nurse made homemade wine and would bring and give to us. And I don't know what was in that devil potion, but it would mess me up. So we head up to Grand Rapids, check into our hotel. Next day, we're in conference all day. That night, come back, and we decided to crack open a bottle of that wine that this nurse brought. We're drinking the wine, and then we decide to call an Uber and go to this casino because we were like, okay, we can eat dinner there. So I go to the front desk and ask for them to get us an Uber. And so we're sitting down in the lobby with our little plastic cups of wine, drinking it. And this guy walks in, this older gentleman, very buff though. And he looks at us and he goes, "You guys waiting for a ride?" And so I assumed, oh, this is our Uber that was called. And I'm like, yeah, that's us, and I'm normally very introverted, but you put that devil potion in me and I was a mess. So we go out. And it kind of quickly became clear that this guy, I don't know if he was just some random dude that thought we needed a ride, but he had a minivan. And so I sit up front.
Was it paneled?
It wasn't like an all white van, but I sit up front and Martha and the other nurse are in the back behind. And as we're going, this guy's chatting me up and, telling me how he used to be a bodybuilder. I think he was Russian. I don't know. And I'm just like, because the wine has kicked in and
the rough and mossy have got me.
And so we get to the casino and then he's like, I don't know what time you guys are planning to leave, but there's no rides that you can get back here, from here to the hotel after a certain time. So you should call me. And so I'm like, oh, okay, what's your number? And what's your name? I'll put it in my phone. And he's like, just call me Big Daddy. So I'm like, all right. So I type into my phone, Big Daddy. Okay, what's your phone number? I put it in and we walk away. And Martha is like, we are not writing back with him.
I could see it.
She's like, he was a horrible driver. I can't believe we lived through that. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because I was completely oblivious. Again, it was the wine in the front seat. And she's like, we are not, And I was like, and then she was like, he was hitting on you. And I'm like, no, he wasn't. Again, I'm an oblivious person. So we go in and we have fun and play some slots, eat some dinner, and it comes time to leave. And we go out, and sure enough, there's
Big Daddy?
No one. Well, nobody around. And I was like, to hail a taxi or a Uber, how sometimes they're waiting. There was nothing, and there was nothing to be gotten. And so I was like, I can call Big Daddy. And she was just like, she was very, very hesitant. The other nurse was as well, but I was like, we got to get back. And so they're like, okay. So I called Big Daddy, and he shows up in his minivan, but now he has another gentleman with him. And we got in and they delivered us safely back, but probably was not one of my brightest moments. I attribute it to the wine. But so I have this funny picture because, okay, so we've been talking a lot about Martha, but we haven't talked about what she looked like. She was a tiny package.
Mm-hmm. But 4'11", 4'10".
Yeah. Yes, but fierce. And so we have this picture and it cracks me up because it's like me and Big Daddy, and then Martha's standing behind us and all you can see is her eyes in the picture and they're just bugging out. I can't believe we just lived to tell. And so, yeah, afterwards she was just like, I can't believe I let you do this to us, I was like, we lived, we were safe, we got a ride back, and we met Big Daddy in the process. So... So that's my funny story about her.
That's definitely Martha. Like, stays quiet, and then afterwards we're going to talk and discuss what we should have done differently.
Right? I was like, well, you guys didn't have any better ideas on how to get us back, and I had his number, so let's go. Honestly, I don't even know if he really was I've told my husband the story, and he's like, well, did you pay him for the ride? And I'm like, I don't even remember now. I honest to God, don't even remember. So anyhow, shout out to Big Daddy in Grand Rapids.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think one of the things that's very powerful about us as nurses is the realization that we never fully know the impact that we leave on people. And I think that Martha would have never guessed that the three of us would be gathered around this table, sitting in my basement, recording a podcast about her. But here we are. So as we close, I want to end with this. If she could listen to this episode, what would you want her to know?
Oh, way more than I can probably put into words, but I called her Princessa because actually she was a descendant of Moctezuma, one of the pure bloodlines that was actually had that last name. Mm-hmm. And so I always called her Princessa. And I would tell her that I think of her every day. Something always brings her to my mind. You know, I have pictures pop up of all her different group activities. I had one pop up this morning. And it just, she's a dear friend, and I'm looking forward to seeing her one day.
Mm-hmm. I would say to her, thank you. Thank you for who she was. And thank you for her belief in me as a new baby nurse, sometimes giving me my marching orders, and me leaning on her faith in me to get me through to where I then could have the confidence in myself.
I've always felt that without Martha and Pat and my select family, that I would not have been happy in Fort Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
But I also just appreciate her allowing me in her personal world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because she was very private, and the professional push she always gave me and the courage.
Yeah. What part of her legacy do you hope future nurses or nurses that hear this or nurses that knew her continue?
To look at every person as a whole, as the person that they are, not who
their
we
disease
think
process.
They should be, not the dialysis patient in whatever room. Just Martha saw people with her heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, suspending judgment.
Martha really was a firm believer in continuing education, being the best in the health field that you choose to be, and being a team player. I mean, she really always had somebody's back. And one of my favorite things was somebody would call in and she was like, okay, I'll call you in about 4 hours. Go back to sleep and let's see if you feel better. She had the compassion and she had the encouragement, and it didn't matter what your degree was, what part of the team for the healthcare team you were on. There was just that level of respect. And I think making sure that stays in the forefront, not being afraid to get your hands dirty, just because she was charge nurse, she didn't not go and do something.
Oh, yeah. She was in the trenches.
She was always in the trenches. And that is I think, one of the most important things to not lose sight of, and she never did.
Mm-hmm. No, she didn't. She would never ask a staff member to do something she wasn't more than willing to do herself, and she just...
And being willing to teach people and knowing that it might take more than 1 or 2 times for them to catch on. Not every skill that nursing does comes easy to every nurse.
Right. But the payoff and having that patience in the teaching, you're going to get that. So today's conversation reminds me that sometimes the most influential nurses aren't remembered because of what they've accomplished. They're remembered because of how they made people feel. Confidence, dignity, compassion, joy. That's care beyond the chart. Thanks for listening. If this episode reminded you of a nurse who shaped your life, send it to them. Or tell them while you still can. This has been Care Beyond the Chart, Strength Behind the Scrubs. I'm Misty Burgett. Take care of yourselves and each other, and keep showing up for people.